Hey everyone, today is Monday, March 22nd, and here is today's Monday Morning Minute. For today, we will recap last week's critical response, then we'll talk about this week and what is going on with all of those readings. Then I want to introduce critical response number 5 for you, and then finally just a couple of course notes and reminders. So last week, I urged you all through critical response number 3, or number 4 rather, to read chapter 3 in our Spires text and to select a text that you could see yourself using in the context of your PBI unit, and then applying one or more of the close reading strategies that Spires et al. Lay out in chapter 3. And it was really interesting both being privy to some of these conversations synchronously on Tuesday and then also looking through what was happening on our discussion board. And I just have some kind of big takeaways that I want to impart to you all. And the first of these is that I want you to feel empowered as professionals, as disciplinarians, to modify and combine these strategies as you need to. So for instance, the hashtag summary strategy, which a lot of us chose, fun and relevant, and I could definitely see where it'd be super engaging, but it also limits us, right? And many of you noted that it limits us to just a few words. And when we're talking about something as rich as poetry or a super nuanced news article or primary source, a hashtag summary may not be enough for you to know that your students are closely reading the text and getting all of that nuance and all of the content. So I see that hashtag summaries as something you could easily add on to something else. So in the case of poetry, especially, we could do the TP cast, and then at the end have students either break up a poem into stanzas or for the whole poem, your choice. I with the science group who came last week synchronously, we talked about how the toads heuristic didn't actually leave room for students' own purposes for reading, and that's actually really important. Like, why am I reading this? What am I hoping to get out of it? So I put MP toads for my purpose. Maybe that's something to determine before we go into title, organization, etc. And then Tom in our synchronous session brought up this idea of reading laterally, so something that he's already learned and discussed in history courses. Think about how to operationalize that within K-12. I could very easily see coming up with another funny acronym or a graphic organizer that allows students to grasp and practice those skills. So again, feel free, take ownership of these, change them as you need to. Secondly, a lot of us, I think, for this go round realized that the strategy that we chose actually wasn't super well suited for the particular text that we had. And that's fine. That is part of the learning process. And this is just something to think about moving forward. Be very careful in terms of deciding which strategy you want your students to use. And a lot of this goes back to what you want them to get out of it. When they read this poem, when they read this letter, this historical letter, when they read this chart, what's the most important information and what are the most important skills that you want students to derive from interacting with this text? That can help you determine which strategy or which combination of strategies might be the best. And then finally, perhaps goes without saying, but close reading is hard. It takes practice. And for many of us all of us who are hyper proficient readers, it can be really annoying, let's say, to grapple with the specifics of a text. Remember, though, that you are teachers and that your students need to learn these skills, and therefore you need to model them, because the way that you interact with those texts will be a cue for your students. So if you just kind of breeze over stuff and say okay, so, what do we think it was? Yep, that one sentence that you said so-and-so is perfect. Moving on. That's the way that you are teaching them to interact with texts. And again, close reading is super important, especially for our students. It's a key skill. Okay, so this week is a bit of a choose your own adventure. And this came about because as much as I have been impressed with this book, so far, our Aspires text. I also want to respond to the needs that may or may not be out there among you all in terms of like, okay, so what does it actually mean for my content area? If we perhaps don't have like a super strong grasp of what reading, writing, and speaking look like uniquely within our content area, this is the week to kind of choose your own adventure. So I'm calling like the theme generally, exploring the discourse of disciplinary literacies, and discourse being, a very broad term. But for this week, I am inviting you to choose to read closely at least one of these readings. But yeah, the minimum is one. So the Winchell article talks about discourse, academic language, and it's fairly engaging, I would say. And then I pulled 2 chapters and painstakingly and somewhat ineffectively scanned from this book on the right of the screen here. It's called This is Disciplinary Literacy. And again, had we been on campus, had it not been a pandemic, I would have gotten this book and I would have copied it on a copy machine where you can just, kind of smash it against the glass and get really nice lines. Not the case here. I used a scanning app on my phone. Don't tell any copyright folks. But the reason I did this is because I do think that this author lays out, I think, much more clearly, like, here's what reading and math looks like. Here's what reading and science looks like, and does the same with writing as well. So again, the first talks about discourse, talking academic language. The second is about reading within disciplines. The third is about writing within disciplines. You are welcome to certainly skim and scan all of them if that's going to be most helpful for you, but please make sure to look at least one of them in some depth. Okay, and critical response number 5. So coming up, the initial post will be due this Thursday, the 25th, 2 follow-ups on Sunday. You might have noticed as well that I have changed the groups, and that is because we have those synchronous sessions, and I wanted to be sure that the groups were big enough such that everyone was in a group with other people. That's why I made that slight change. But again, in the service of sort of like moving us forward toward our next project, which is the literacy artifact analysis, I actually want you to choose a literacy artifact that you're going to analyze. And again, this could be something very much in line with your vision of your project-based inquiry unit. And I don't want you to repeat the text that you used last week. Let's get another text in the mix here. And I want you to analyze the conceptual demands. What are the tricky concepts or context that students will need to know? What are the tricky linguistic features? Think about vocabulary, think about syntax, think about perhaps even like the organization of information, especially in the case of a chart or a graph. And then I want you to take one or more strategies or ideas that are presented in the reading that you chose, and tell how you might actually apply that to this particular artifact. So again, I guess similar to last week, and then last week we're really focusing on close reading. And here we're thinking about the conceptual demands, the linguistic features, and how to ensure that students across levels, multiple levels, can access that information, that content. So that is critical response number 5. This prompt is up on Canvas. And a few course notes. Remember that we do have another optional synchronous session coming up this Tuesday, the 23rd at 5:45 p.m. And that if you come to this synchronous session, your entire participation in critical response number 5 is waived, I guess, if that's a way to put it. Basically, you come, you participate, you get those 5 points for that participation. So you don't need to do either the initial post or the follow-ups on Canvas, because ideally you're doing that work synchronously with your peers. All right, that's all that we have this week. I'm so excited to see whoever wants to come on Tuesday. Again, zero pressure. The impetus behind offering these synchronous sessions is just to give you options. You are in charge. You are adults. You are responsible. You are brilliant. Do what works for you. And if that's a synchronous session, excellent. If it's Canvas, excellent. I'm here for it in any case. So take good care, everyone. And I'll be back next week.